Karen attacked my son with a hose. My Marine brother took down her boyfriend. Part 1. You don't forget the sound your child makes when they're ambushed by cold water. It's not a scream. It's not a sob. It's a crack, a shatter in their voice, in their body, in whatever fragile sense of safety they thought they still had in this world. And I'll never forget the moment I turned the corner and saw my son soaking wet, gasping in his chair, arms covering his face while Karen gripped the garden hose like it was a sword of justice. My name is Ava Brooks. I'm a single mom, 39, high school English teacher, mother of a 9-year-old boy named Jace, who was born with cerebral palsy and doesn't speak with his mouth, but with his eyes, his fingers, and a tablet he loves like a friend. We moved to Bramble Glen for the space, for the quiet, for the illusion of safety. We didn't expect the self-appointed queen of the HOA to turn a hose on my son in broad daylight, but she did. And when I saw her do it, something ancient inside me cracked open. That morning, Jace had asked via tablet to sit in the sun. He likes our driveway. It's warm, open, just far enough from the flower beds that bees don't surprise him. I always lay out his mat and park his wheelchair at the edge so he can feel the breeze. I was just inside, finishing a lesson plan. 5 minutes. That's how long I left him out there alone. Karen had complained about the mat before, called it sidewalk clutter, claimed Jace's therapy tools, the chew sticks, the rhythm cards, the weighted bear made the neighborhood look like a rummage sale. She said if he wasn't going to walk or speak like a normal child, we should keep him indoors. I'd filed a complaint. Nothing happened. The HOA board is half retired, passive, and terrified of Karen. But even I didn't expect her to escalate to this. I ran out the front door and saw her standing smugly over my son, thumb pressed firmly on the nozzle. Water streaked across his chest and face. His therapy bear was limp and dripping on the concrete. "Are you insane?" I screamed. She turned slightly, like I'd interrupted her yard work. He was blocking the sidewalk. "It's our driveway." He flinched when I asked him to move. Probably didn't understand me. "That's a safety issue." "You soaked a disabled child," I redirected him. She said coolly. Didn't touch him. Behind her. Her boyfriend Dean stood with crossed arms. Big. Redneck. Dumb as drywall and twice as smug. "Maybe keep your crippled kid off public sightlines next time," he said, grinning. That's when I lunged. I don't remember screaming. Just motion. Rage. A mother's scream turned physical. Karen shrieked. Dean stepped forward. But before he could take a second step, before I could even connect, another voice cut through the air like thunder. "Step away from my nephew, my brother, Elijah. You've never seen a man fill a driveway like a shadow until you've seen my brother in Marine mode. 6'2", built like a tank, bronze skin, posture like a war movie still, tattoo of his unit number wrapped around one wrist like a reminder. He'd just flown in the night before to surprise Jace. We hadn't told him yet. He walked toward them slow, like the pavement belonged to him. Dean turned, puffed up like a peacock. "You threatening a civilian?" Soldier Elijah didn't blink. "I'm not a soldier," he said. "I'm a Marine, retired, but never unarmed." Dean laughed. "You got a gun. Tough guy." "No," Elijah said. "Just training." And then he moved. I swear it happened in 5 seconds. Dean tried to swing. Elijah ducked, grabbed his wrist midair, twisted, and dropped the man to his knees with one move. The air left Dean's lungs like a popped tire. Karen screamed. Jace watched, soaked but wide-eyed. I stood frozen. Elijah leaned down, calm as a priest. "Apologize," he said to Dean. Dean wheezed. Elijah pressed just enough pressure on the hold to make him gasp. "Apologize to the child you mocked, the mother you insulted, and the driveway you contaminated with your cowardice." Dean choked out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Elijah released him. Dean collapsed. Karen tried to speak, but Elijah cut her off with a glare that felt like judgment from the gods. You're done. We called the police. They came fast." Dean claimed assault. Karen claimed self-defense, but neighbors had seen the whole thing. One woman pulled up ring footage. Another neighbor had already uploaded it to TikTok. By the time the cops reviewed the footage, Karen was in handcuffs for assault on a disabled minor. Dean was issued a citation for inciting violence and taken into custody pending charges. Jace got warm towels. Karen got escorted away. And Elijah just walked back to Jace, crouched, and whispered, "She thought water could break you. She didn't know you've always been the ocean." That night, the video exploded. Over 1.2 million views in 12 hours. The hashtag #JusticeForJace trended nationwide. Celebrities reposted it. Disability advocates flooded our inbox. And veterans celebrated Elijah like a returning hero. But none of it fixed the bear, or the tablet, or the fact that Jace still flinched when I reached for a glass of water near him later that night. So Elijah made a decision. Let's rebuild. He said, bigger. Part 2. Elijah once told me that the quietest men in his unit were the most dangerous. The loud ones just want to be heard, he said. The silent ones. They're listening, learning, planning. He didn't raise his voice the day after the hose incident. He didn't yell at City Hall or punch walls. He just sat on the porch with a notebook and Jace beside him, wet bear drying on the railing, and said, "You don't fight bullies with noise. You fight them with facts, cameras, and a trail they can't erase." That was the day the Marine in him went to war not with fists, but with strategy. The HOA in Bramble Glen was, on paper, legitimate, but Elijah knew how to read between the lines. He requested the last 3 years' worth of HOA board minutes, violations, and disbursement records under the state's transparency ordinance. At first, they resisted. He sent a follow-up request referencing Section 4280 of the HOA Disclosure Act, along with a notice that failure to comply would trigger a legal complaint signed by a retired military officer with knowledge of federal reporting systems. They folded in 24 hours. What he found was damning. Karen had spearheaded 74 violations in the past 18 months. More than half were directed at families with disabled children, elderly residents with ramps, or non-white homeowners. She'd fined a man $50 for a prayer mat on his porch. She fined a woman with a prosthetic leg for leaving a shower chair on the curb too long. She even filed an anonymous noise complaint against a 10-year-old boy with Tourette's for vocal disruptions during daylight hours. The pattern was obvious, and Elijah wasn't about to let it go. We took the evidence to a city council member, Maya Ellis, a former special ed teacher and longtime disability advocate. She read through Elijah's file and said quietly, "I've been waiting for something like this." Within a week, she launched a formal inquiry into Bramble Glen's HOA board under ADA violation review procedures. The city's legal office got involved. Media outlets began circling. Karen's name, already infamous from the viral video, was now attached to terms like pattern of abuse, discriminatory enforcement, targeted harassment, and still she denied everything. Meanwhile, Jace was healing. He didn't cry when he saw the hose anymore. But he didn't ask to go outside either. So Elijah built something new. Out of wood, plexiglass, and dedication. He built Jace a private sun shelter on the porch, reinforced walls, a lockable side gate, overhead shade, a sensory garden corner. He painted it blue and called it the watch post. It's not just a place to sit, he told Jace, it's your command center. Jace typed out, "I like that." He sat there every morning after that. People started visiting. One mom dropped off flowers, another on cookies. They didn't want to say much, just be present. And presence matters when you felt invisible. So we called a meeting. The community center packed to standing room only. Elijah brought charts. I brought testimony. Neighbors brought stories we'd never heard. Mr. Andrada, whose autistic son was told to shut up or move out. Ms. Fields, whose daughter's service dog was denied community pool access. A single dad who received 6 citations in 3 weeks after installing a wheelchair lift. They all thought they were alone. Karen had counted on that. She'd built her control on isolation. But the moment we spoke as one, it broke her power. We formed a committee, the Bramble Coalition for Accessible Living. Elijah called it BCAL. He drafted a resolution demanding the HOA repeal all discriminatory fines retroactively, resign all current board members, create a permanent accessibility subcommittee with veto power, issue a public apology to the Brooks family and others harmed. We posted it publicly and mailed it to every resident. Karen called it emotional blackmail. The residents called it justice overdue. On the day of the vote, a crowd gathered under the banner. We don't wash away our own. It passed, 92% in favor. Karen and Dean were forced to vacate their roles, pay back $14 and $300 in wrongfully collected fines, and were barred from holding any board position in the state for 5 years under new legislation inspired by Elijah's research. Dean tried to appeal. The judge threw it out in 8 minutes. But Elijah wasn't done. He started writing policy briefs. He connected with military buddies who had children with disabilities. They helped him publish a proposal titled Operation Shield Building, Family-Centered Housing Protections for Veterans and Disabled Communities. It went viral. City councils across 3 states reached out. One senator did too. They're now reviewing it as a model for statewide HOA reform. And Jace, he doesn't need the watch post anymore. He still uses it, but now he wheels out on his own, down the block, into the park. He doesn't flinch when sprinklers go off. He knows who he is now, and more importantly, so do we. Karen left town, sold her house below market value. Last I heard, she tried to join another HOA board 2 counties over. They said no. They'd heard about the hose. Dean never showed his face again. The day after his hearing, someone spray-painted no honor and bullying on his truck. No one confessed. No one needed to. At dinner one night, I asked Elijah why he stayed as long as he did. He sipped his beer, looked at Jace laughing in the other room, and said, because she used water to try and shrink him. But this family, we're fire. We don't drown easy. Part 3. By the 3rd week after the incident, our driveway no longer smelled like wet rubber and bleach. It smelled like fresh paint and rosemary. That's because Elijah, my brother, had repainted the porch railings by hand and helped Jace plant his first herb garden along the fence line. It was his way of reclaiming the space, turning a battlefield into a sanctuary. It's not about fixing what they broke, Elijah said. It's about reminding them they can't take the soil. Jace was flourishing. The watch post was now more than a calming shelter. It was a symbol. Kids from all over the neighborhood started asking their parents if they could have one too. And not just disabled kids, all of them. They didn't see it as special. They saw it as cool. And that's what changed everything. One day, we got a package. No return label. Inside was a garden hose, cut neatly into 4 sections. Taped to it was a handwritten note. Some wounds heal slower, but not all of them are ours to keep. I hope you turn this into something better. From someone who was once too quiet, Elijah read it twice, then hung one of the hose pieces above the door to the watch post. He drilled it into a wooden frame and labeled it The Day They Underestimated Us. The Bramble Coalition for Accessible Living, BCAL, was now a full-fledged 501c3. Donations flooded in, not because people felt sorry, but because they felt angry, inspired, ashamed they hadn't spoken sooner. We used the funds to offer free legal consultations for families harassed by HOA boards, sensory-safe construction workshops, de-escalation training for neighborhood watch programs, and most radically HOA reform clinics. The name made people laugh, but the idea was serious. Teach neighborhood leaders what not to do. Use the hose as a symbol of what happens when authority isn't tempered by empathy. We even got invited to speak at the National HOA Summit in Denver. Elijah stood in front of 2,000 board members and said, if you can't tell the difference between a flower bed and a child's medical device, if you think silence means approval, if your power depends on a rule book written without disabled voices, then you're not protecting a community, you're fencing it in. They gave him a standing ovation. HOAs from 9 states requested toolkits from BCAL the next week. And then, Elijah got the email that changed everything. Subject: ADA Policy Reform, Federal Invitation for Review Board Participation, Body Dear Mr. Elijah Brooks. Your proposal, Operation Shield, has been shortlisted by the Committee on Inclusive Residential Law for adoption under the 2026 ADA Amendment Package. We invite you to Washington, D.C. to present in-person testimony. He called me that night. I didn't write this to be political. He said, "You wrote it to protect Jace." I replied, "And every kid like him." He added. He flew out the following month. I stayed behind with Jace, the day Elijah stood before Congress. We watched from the living room with the curtains open, sunlight spilling across the wheelchair Jace no longer feared. Elijah's voice echoed through the C-SPAN feed. No notes, just posture, power, pain. My nephew didn't ask to be an example. He just wanted to sit in the sun. But someone decided that his stillness offended them, that his quiet deserved to be drowned. And when we responded, they called us angry. So yes, we are angry, because if a garden hose in the hands of a petty woman can undo a child's peace, then the law should be strong enough to restore it. The chamber was silent when he finished. Then the chairwoman said softly, "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. You've reminded us why policy isn't paperwork. It's people." That night, I took Jace outside. He didn't want the watch post. He wanted to sit on the grass. I wheeled him to the lawn and unbuckled him. He scooted forward and tapped his tablet. Sun, feels like me, by autumn. The watch post model was in 300 schools and parks across the country. Kids now had blue, open-air tents beside basketball courts, beside picnic tables, even beside fire drills so no child would be forced to choose between safety and calm. The hose, it became a relic. We auctioned the last piece of it for charity, $5, $200. We donated every penny to build Jace's garden in the heart of the town park, wheelchair-friendly paths, vertical flower beds, a music wall, and shade structures shaped like open hands. Micah from Tent Line called it a fortress of calm. Karen. No one heard from her again. The last I saw was a post on a local forum. Does anyone know if Karen G. moved back to the city? Her boyfriend's truck was found abandoned in a Walmart lot. We didn't respond, because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about what rose after her. Dean pled guilty, fined, banned from HOA activity, court-ordered anger management. He tried to post a Facebook rant once. It got ratioed by Marines. My favorite comment, imagine losing to a man who fights wars in his sleep and gardens in his free time. Elijah stayed 2 more months. Then he left to continue the fight in other states. Jace cried when he left, but only once, because now, Jace had what he never did before: belonging. Not borrowed, not conditional, not silent, real. One night, after we watered the rosemary plants, I sat beside Jace and said, "You know none of this happens without you, right?" He typed slowly, "I didn't do anything. You existed." I said, "That was enough. That was everything." He smiled, then pointed to the wet ground near the spout. He typed again, "Water remembers. So do we." Part 4. The porch used to creak when we stepped out onto it. Now, it sings. Not literally, but that's how it feels. Maybe it's the way Jace rolls out on his own now, no flinching when sprinklers start across the street. Maybe it's the rosemary bushes swaying next to the flag Elijah raised last Veterans Day. Maybe it's just the memory of silence being replaced by a rhythm we finally own. But something about our porch has changed, and the world is starting to notice. It started with a letter. The Department of Education had officially added the Watch Post model to its National Disability Accommodation resources. The program Elijah helped create, what began as a single, handmade structure on our porch, was now recognized in 23 states, 312 districts, and more than 9,000 schools. Sensory stations modeled after Jace's watch post were being built in courtyards, lobbies, and even some police departments. A retired Marine had led a war not with fists, but with facts. And my son, the quiet child with no voice, had become the one name everyone was listening to. One morning, I opened the door to find a news crew on the sidewalk. They were from a national morning show, one of those with smiling anchors and shiny sets. They didn't ask for drama. They asked for time. They wanted to sit with Jace, see his garden, visit the community park we'd helped transform. Jace agreed, as long as they brought a chewable mic cover. He smiled through most of the interview, tapping his tablet when they asked, "What does safety mean to you?" His reply, "Safety means people don't ask why you're different. They ask how they can help." That line trended for 2 days. They ran the segment as the porch that didn't flinch. People cried. More letters came in. From kids who said their schools had built tents for them. From parents who said their children finally felt okay being still. From veterans who'd seen war, but never seen a family hold the line like we did. And then, Elijah was called back to testify again this time for the final round of the ADA amendment bill, now nicknamed the Jace Act. He stood taller this time, not because he had something to prove, but because he didn't. He'd already done it. He spoke for 12 minutes, then handed the committee chair a printout of Jace's first typed sentence after the incident. "Don't be afraid of water." The room stood in silence, and then, slowly, applause. The bill passed, unanimously. Its contents federal protection of sensory shelters as ADA-compliant infrastructure. Nationwide ban on HOA citations involving visible medical aids or calming structures. Mandatory disability de-escalation training for HOA boards. Creation of a national task force for neighborhood inclusion standards. And perhaps most beautifully, funding for every public school to build their own version of a watch post. Elijah called it our retirement mission. The day it passed, we held a small ceremony on our porch. Neighbors came, some from nearby, some from counties away, a few we'd never seen before. They just wanted to say thank you. We lit soft blue lights around the railing. Jace sat in his chair under a canopy Elijah strung between the posts. And for the first time in his life, he read aloud carefully, softly from his tablet. "They sprayed me, but I didn't drown. I grew." There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. Even Elijah wiped his cheek. Maureen sweat. He joked. Karen never came back. Her name faded from the news, but her actions didn't. In fact, they were studied used as case examples in training seminars titled, "When HOA Power Turns to Prejudice." Some say we ruined her life. I say she exposed it herself. We just made sure people heard it. Dean last we heard, he moved to a city with no HOA and no respect. He left a 1-star Yelp review of a law firm that dropped him mid-case. Someone replied with a gif of a sprinkler, "But that's not the legacy we keep. We don't keep the hose. We keep the garden." Elijah eventually returned to North Carolina, but not before helping us build a second watch post in the town square. This one isn't just for Jace. It's for anyone. Kids, elders, veterans, parents who need to breathe. It's shaped like a curved open palm, with soft walls and quiet wind chimes. We named it the Shelter of Stillness. Jace visits it every week. He wheels himself to the corner, rests, then rolls home with rosemary clippings tucked into his lap. His tablet now carries dozens of phrases he's added himself. One of my favorites, "I am not the problem. I am the lesson. The porch still sings." Elijah left his boots under the bench. Jace keeps one hose nozzle in his room like a trophy. And me, I sit every night, breathe the rosemary air, and whisper a silent promise no one will ever make him afraid of water again, because the porch didn't flinch, it rose, and it took the world with it. The end.